You're struggling to build your career and trying to level up from an executive assistant role, and life punches you in the gut, delivering you the worst news a mom can receive. How do you recover? Well, for Jenny Meyer, she felt she had no option but to throw herself completely into building her business. She shows up more fearless than ever, yet leads with empathy and compassion. Listen in for a touching story and inspiration on how to deal with mental health, parenting challenges, loss, and opportunity. Let's dive in. Welcome to Something from Nada, the only podcast designed to explore entrepreneurial stories of determination, focusing on first-generation immigrants and underserved leaders. In each episode, we'll introduce you to the unlikely changemakers, shattering intergenerational cycles as they defy the odds to build something amazing from nothing. My name is Nada Ahmed, and I'm your host. I'm really excited to be here today with Jenny Meyer.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up? And kind of talk us through that journey of where that led you to and where you are today.
What did I want to be when I grew up? I really wanted to be a spy, actually.
Interesting.
Yes, but that didn't happen. Actually, no, business development is a bit of sleuthing. It's actually quite a bit of espionage. Mm-hmm. But I had this dream, especially as a teenager. I grew up in small town East Texas. Really wanted to get out of small town East Texas. Just the values, it was just too small for me. And so I had this vision, especially as a teenager, that I really wanted to be in the big city. I felt like I wanted to be a boss of something, but I didn't really know what. And I got to Houston as fast as I could after college.
Interesting. And what do you think that inspiration that you had, sometimes you have something in your life or someone in your life that inspires you, that makes you think, oh, this small town life isn't for me, or it's not enough. Where do you think you got that from, that feeling?
I think it was because of traveling, and we didn't travel a ton. Both my parents were entrepreneurs, so my father had several pharmacies in East Texas. We also had a gift shop, and we traveled a lot to Dallas, for instance, to go to market, to find the retail items for the gift shop. Every time we went to Galveston and we circled downtown Houston, that was my favorite part of the trip, was just seeing the skyscrapers. And in fact, my first job in Houston was in the tallest skyscraper, which I thought was incredibly cool.
So the Chase Tower?
Yes.
Yeah, and was that your first job?
That was my first job out of college in Houston. I went to work for a mediator, a female who owned her own mediation business at the time. She was the most popular and most used and most successful mediator, man or woman, in Houston and maybe even in Texas. And
what does a mediator do?
Mediator, so she handled civil lawsuits. Both parties would come and she would help them negotiate a settlement, basically to ease the courts.
Do you have to be a lawyer to be a mediator?
You do.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is like espionage then, because you're like finding all this information and then helping mediate both sides. It requires a lot of the similar skills.
And what I learned is, and I was even doing it in my jobs in college, was I'm really good at putting people's names and their companies together. And it's a big deal in client service too. You'll notice it when you're at the dentist. My dental tech is extremely good at this. She'll ask me my daughter's name as soon as I get there, and I haven't been there in a year. It's those sorts of things that make clients come back to you. It's because you remember details about their lives. At your favorite restaurant, the restaurants you go to the most are the ones where they know exactly which glass of wine you want with your starter. For instance, they know your name, they ask about your children. And so that is a bit of espionage. You have to know the right questions to ask, but you also have to have the memory, and you have to actually care.
Yeah. And you think you had that from a very young age? Being able to remember people's names,
but just also
the details about them. And client service to me means that. It means caring enough to know your children's names, because I know if I show that care to you, and even with your colleagues, if I show that care to you, you are going to be more engaged. You're also going to return to my business. Yeah, I mean, it just shows that you're paying attention, that you're interested in this person. And who doesn't want that?
Exactly.
Who doesn't want to be sitting next to a person who's really curious about them and their life, and they remember what they said last time? I struggle with remembering people's names. So do you have a trick on how to do that?
It's just been years of practice and realizing it's really frustrating to me when I meet someone and instantly lose their name. And as I get older, that happens more and more. I just think it's that genuine interest.
Okay.
And I also am not, many people disagree with me, I am not the Uber networker.
Okay.
I am not going to walk into a room and try and get as many business cards as possible. That's just not me. But I will have a few conversations that are meaningful. And those are the people that I remember.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's more impactful and more effective, right? Because people will also remember those conversations. And do you think it is a memory thing that some people, it seems like sometimes just naturally can remember people's name a lot better than others? Or is it something that can be trained over time?
I think you can be trained over time. There's a listening book, actually, I've not read it, but a lot of the points are, a lot of times we are focused on what we're going to say and how we're going to respond. So we're not even hearing in the moment. So I think a lot of it is just being present. And you have to work on presence. I think that's actually a daily practice, that if you work on your presence and being mindful and taking that time to listen to what someone is really saying. And I like to remind people, listening is not just with your ears. No. It's looking at your body language. Body language says a lot. Just to tell you the whole story about a person. This person may be nervous. What can I do? I totally get that. I grew up very shy as a child. What can I do to disarm them, to make them more comfortable?
Yeah, they say, I think more than 80% of the communication that happens with a person is through their body language. So you don't even have to say much, but it's the way you show up, the way you smile, the way you're like paying attention that can make an impact. So it seems like you discovered that strength that you had at a young age and were able to hone on that as you progressed through your career. So can you talk a little bit about that, about what you did after your first job?
Yeah. So actually, it was what I did, but I didn't really put it together. That was business development. I knew it's what I enjoyed in my jobs. So I worked for the mediator, and that was fantastic. I was able to earn my MBA while working for her because she was a mom too. I had a young son, so she was great about that. She was great about me going to school too, even though she knew it would probably mean that I would move on from that first job. So that was great, and I learned so many things from her. I got to speak at her memorial service, which was such an honor too, just to give back to her in her honor. But after that, I went to private equity. I didn't get to do as much of the business development. I was an executive assistant, but I did get to work with the portfolio company officers and use those same skills of learning their likes, their dislikes, to help them build those portfolio companies. I learned transactional due diligence too, which is great because my company does quite a bit of that now. So I can put those pieces together. I did finally, at the end of my time there, work on business development. So it's that spy thing again. What's their email address? How do I get their phone number? What's the best gift to send them? Those sorts of things that just aren't necessarily intuitive. You have to have that curiosity to figure out.
And you must be, good at whatever you were doing. You started as an executive assistant and made your way up at this private equity firm and got exposure to doing a lot of different things. How was that? How was it moving up from that level and having people see you as someone more than an executive assistant?
It was hard, actually, to do that. There's a glass ceiling for executive assistants. I think that was never my plan to be one. It was just, it's a great job. I have that nurturing personality too, and I also am a problem solver naturally, plus the curiosity that I mentioned. Those skills go very well, and I'm very organized. Those are great skills for an EA. And that's what makes a successful EA. I still don't like booking travel, though, unless it's for myself, but that's another thing. I was able to, because I had my MBA, I was able to work on the deals. I was given a lot more tasks that the other administrative support really didn't care to do. But again, that curiosity that I have, I was just hungry for more, which meant late nights when you're in the middle of a deal. those are long hours. I know that some of the associates, they didn't go home, especially right up to close. Yeah. But what I learned doing that was invaluable.
Yeah. But it also speaks something about who you are, that most people after an MBA would not go and get an executive assistant job. I'm sure they would have other opportunities. So what made you go for that in the first place?
Small town East Texas girl, right? I had earned my MBA, super smart. The pay was significantly higher than when I was working with the mediator. I didn't feel like, because I didn't go to Harvard, for instance, so I didn't feel that I had the capability to do much more necessarily. Yeah. That was an easy job. I had my young son. At this time, I had a young family. Yeah. I'm not going to say the hours are easy, but it was something that I knew I could do and do well. Yeah. So it was safe.
Yeah. So it was a safe option. But you probably also saw an opportunity in being able to get exposure to doing due diligence and being exposed to all these portfolio companies.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happened next? What was your last role at that private equity firm, and where did you go next?
Business development. And I really liked that. There was not likely going to be a way for me to be promoted to anything beyond that. And I happened to be at a place in my life where I could take some time off. And so I did a few years. Okay. I volunteered a lot. Yeah. Actually was just a mom for a minute, which there's something to say about that too.
I think that's pretty brave for women to do that. When they do, is take that break and realize this is a special time that's not coming back. And sometimes we get so caught up in the expectations of people around us, and even our own expectations, right? Like, we're going to be a working mom, we're going to be this powerful career woman, but not realizing that time is going to pass by and these moments are not going to come back, and that sometimes it's okay to pause. But I think that also requires self-confidence and bravery to say that doesn't mean, because I think most people don't do it because of the fear of not being able to go back.
And that was an obstacle for me that I didn't really think about. I think it also, too, for me anyways, I didn't feel like I was adding value to the family treasure, if that makes sense. So
if you weren't working?
Right. Yeah. And so it was really hard for me to relax into, okay, you're taking some time off. It's okay if husband pays the bills. It's okay that you're not contributing financially. That was really difficult for me.
I think it is very hard once you get used to having your own bank account and your own money coming your way. I mean, I did that for a while, and I hate being dependent on a man and like having to ask them for money to say, hey, can I make this trip, or can I do this for myself? You lose a bit of freedom and independence. Absolutely something to think about for all women is when you do decide to make that decision to take a pause, like also understand some level of freedom that you're giving up because your family income goes down.
I think there's that. I think too, though, I think there's some situations, and I think different couples do things differently.
Yes.
But in this situation, it was okay at first.
Yeah.
There was plenty of money, so it wasn't really a money issue. But then I just felt beholden, and I don't like to feel that at all. So you do give up that freedom, even if money really isn't an issue. There's this, it's just something, and the relationship has to be the right kind of relationship for it to work. I hear of relationships where it's fine. Yeah. And because you are managing a household, that is also a job.
It's a job. It's absolutely a job.
And there's that respect for that, or there's not.
How many years did you take off?
I believe about 3.
3 years. Yeah. And then what made you decide that now was the time for you to enter the workforce again?
It wasn't so much money. It was because I really did want, my children were getting older. We did not share children in this marriage, so I did need and want to contribute to that. And that's scary, even just 3 years. Some women go back after 10 or 20. Even 3 years, I had a lot of conversations with headhunters about my time off. And that was tough. Just to explain, and it shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be a thing to have to explain. Yes, I took off 3 years.
3 years is nothing in the grand scheme of things.
That doesn't mean that all of a sudden somehow I'm not valuable to the workforce.
Yeah. But I think traditionally, like I remember when I was applying to jobs, like the advice you were giving, it was like, you don't want gaps on your CV because
Exactly.
people are going to ask, what did you do in those gaps? And I think that mentalities may be changing because over time, like millennials and hopefully the generation that's coming after us are taking time off. They're going backpacking around the world or doing something else, or just decide to volunteer. And I think hopefully the new generation, new employers are starting to value that. And I think we need to value that because they're experiences that come, lived experiences of people that are going to add value. They build character.
Right. Yeah, they build character, their experiences. I'm a big believer that you want your employees to live life. And I think hopefully for many businesses, and it varies by industry, that because of COVID, we learned many things, but one of them is we don't have to be in an office chair from 8 to 5. I don't think that's been good. That was not, it's especially, I'm going to push the mother thing. For working mothers, it's tough. You miss a lot. It's stressful. Your quality of life isn't what it could be. So having flexibility, allowing people, and promoting vacation, all these things are just good for your mental wellness and your physical wellness. Then you have happier employees who are engaged and your business is better.
Yeah. COVID has been a game changer in terms of having to get employers to rethink what's really necessary and what are we just doing because we've always done it that way. I know a lot of employers are also asking people to come back. And I know I had kids during COVID. I know a lot of my friends did too. And they have 3 kids and they're like, I go to the office 2 times a week and I don't know how I would have managed with 3 kids being able to do that 5 times a week. Like we've gotten so comfortable and used to this and it adds more time. We're able to give more time to our work, but also more time to our kids and overall just have better mental health because we're not stressed all the time because we're not on the road, we're not running. Because I know days when I have to be out of the house for a meeting and I'm stressing to get the kids out of the door and they're having a tantrum and they're crying, they don't want to brush their teeth. And I'm there like screaming and yelling at them and thinking it's the end of the world that I'm going to be 5 minutes late for my meeting. Right? And it's like that level of stress, just taking it completely out of your life, it can do wonders for how you're going to show up at work and at home.
Exactly. And it wasn't I remember those days, by the way. And realizing you have a Cheerio stuck to your shirt when you arrive at the office is just miserable. But then there's also the mom guilt that sets in because you did yell at them or their breakfast wasn't the most nutritious or you forgot to put a cookie in their lunch. You carry those things with you. Yes. And your whole experience of motherhood is just, it's diminished.
Yeah. I remember days when I did that. It got too much and I just screamed, not at my kids, at just the whole situation. And my kids got really scared. And then I felt really bad the rest of the day. And when I went to pick up my son, he was the older one. And I was just like, I'm sorry that I did that. And I'm sorry that I scared you. And it's also for me learning that I can go back and apologize, that I don't have to carry that guilt, that it's something that our parents didn't do. But I'm hoping that the new generation of parents can do so that we can live without that guilt. Because guilt and shame is just a very heavy and debilitating feeling that is going to hold us back from our ambitions in life, whether that's at work or outside of work.
Right. And I think, too, there's just so many things. We've got a long ways to go on many fronts. But the whole grace conversation, I yelled at the kids, but I'm going to give myself grace. I'm trying to make a meeting. In the moment, I was doing the best that I could. I'm not proud of the fact that I yelled at them, but I'm going to be able to apologize. So it's also showing them, hey, you're going to screw up. The way to handle it is apologizing as I've just apologized to you. Mom's not perfect.
Exactly.
And teaching them that, hey, it's teaching them, okay, I'm going to screw up. We try not to.
Yes.
When we do, we make it right.
We make amends.
And we also work, and it's still hard for me to give myself grace. But we show grace.
We show grace.
To ourselves and to others.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful, what you said about grace for yourself and grace for others. And then we're trying to be perfect parents. We're trying to be perfect friends, employees, wives, whatever relationships that we have, and showing and accepting ourselves that we're not perfect. And I think that's a syndrome that a lot of us women struggle with. And that's why we carry this guilt. I gave a talk yesterday, and that was my main message. I wanted to leave women with, how can we live more guilt-free, especially as moms?
Especially as moms.
Yeah. So did you have that feeling of guilt when you did, after 3 years of taking time off, go back to work? How was that transition? Because then you were spending less time with them.
I did, and it was tough to go back to that, especially my daughter was very involved in sports and horses and everything else. So I'm trying to navigate how I'm at the office from 8 to 5, but then making sure she doesn't miss out on anything, because it goes back to that I need to be able to do it all. And I don't want her to miss out because I've gone back to work. It's that constant juggle of priorities.
And so what did you do? Who accepted you back? Yeah.
So I think it was the self-limiting part of me. I thought, look, I've taken 3 years off. I'm going to look for an executive assistant job because those are well paying and I can do that without thinking. And so that's what I'll do. So I interviewed for several companies. The 3 years off was a big thing. I had a couple nibbles. Actually, I had 2 job offers at the same time. And then I met a gentleman who I told him basically, look, I can't do most admin stuff. I'm definitely not going to book your travel. So I'm going to throw that out there now. But I'm a darn good executive assistant, but I want to do more. I don't really know what that more is, but I do want to do more. And he told me I could make this job whatever I wanted it to be. And so after many more interviews, I took that job.
Oh, wow. And so then who'd booked his travel then?
I don't know. Someone else. Not me.
Yeah, no. The importance of knowing what you want and then asking for it, right? And in that moment where you were desperate for a job, you wanted to go back, but I guess you weren't that desperate because you were also pretty sure about what you didn't want to do, because you knew you've done that before. Booking travel, it makes you miserable, and you don't want to put yourself in that situation. And I think that requires a lot of wisdom, because sometimes we sacrifice those things and you're like, you know what, I'll do it for another year. And then you set the wrong expectations to begin with. And so what you did there was like set your boundaries.
Yeah, I think it was really important in this instance. There's a little bit of desperation. I was ready, and I was being pushed a bit to find something. You get to a certain age where, and if you are able to, and we're not always able to, but if you're able to make those choices or put those boundaries in place, I think it's really important. Because when I think about that position now, which is the whole story, but not booking travel made me far better at what I was really good at. Then still really couldn't explain, but I knew that travel just was something that it was just one of those pet peeve things that I just didn't want to do.
Yeah. And just being clear on that and recognizing that, right? Because it's going in there knowing what your non-negotiable is. Like, here's one thing I can't negotiate on. Everything else we can talk about. And also, because when you're going for a job interview, you're also wanting to know if it's a match for you and what you want to do, because you're not there just for a job. You're there to build a career.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I think a lot of times, especially if we're in a desperate place, like you said, we sacrifice those things. But if you think about it, when you sacrifice those things and you're put in a job where you're doing all the things that you don't want to do, you're not happy, you're not performing well. Your employer probably isn't happy, and your colleagues probably, your family isn't happy. Nobody's happy. It doesn't work. Even if you're in a place where you really need to find a position, you need to make money to support yourself and your family. It's really important, though, to make sure that it's got at least enough of the stuff that you love so that you can, because look, all day long, every one of us, we don't do everything that we love. There are things that we don't like to do. But if you can make that balance where it's even a little bit more of the things you like to do or you're passionate about, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to be miserable.
Yeah. No, I think that's incredible
valuable advice that as much as you can, get on the list of things that will give you joy and make it fulfilling for you, because also realizing you're going to do a crappy job and no one's going to be happy because of that. You're not going to perform. It's not going to really get you anywhere if you're ending up doing things that are not using your strengths, they're not using your assets. Yeah, no, I think there's so much that you said there. And I think one thing that I was thinking about was also, you said you come to an age. And I think there's a lot of things that I didn't know starting off. As we're younger, we don't know really what our strengths are. We don't really know. You wouldn't have known that's going to be your pet peeve, that you hate booking travel. But over time, you get experience and you realize these are the things I absolutely love and these are things that I don't do well. And then it's about how do you articulate that? How do you hone your career so that you're doing more of what you are good at, so that you're operating in your zone of genius? And it becomes a career that you enjoy, right? And that's how it's sustainable. So I think for me also, it was motherhood gives you that, because you're in a way sacrificing when you're going to work, you're away from your kids. So it adds another layer where you're like, if I'm going to be going to work, I might as well be enjoying it. I don't want to be miserable, because here I am spending time away from my kids, maybe not making it to their soccer practice as much as I would want to, so I could be at this work. So let's make it worth it.
And I think that's true. It's brilliant. Motherhood, I think, and it's not just an age thing, it's motherhood too. Motherhood makes you reprioritize everything. And not just work, but really everything. It helps you think about, okay, there just are some things that now are non-negotiable, whether it's certain friends or certain activities, whatever it is, because this is a main focus.
Time suddenly becomes so limited.
Absolutely. And so you have to be very choosy about where you spend it.
Yeah. And also, so there's a part of being a mother, but even if you're not a mother, I think there's a part of the confidence you get as you get older in who you are and what you're no longer willing to do. So I encourage people who are fresh out of college to do the dirty work, like go and book the travel so that you could get the job and get other experience. But then for your second job, you could be pickier. And as you move up the ladder, be pickier and be more demanding. I think especially as women, we're not as much. And I don't think I was as much. I accepted a job and I realized early on my boss wanted to do things that weren't really what I just said yes to. But I didn't have enough confidence. I wasn't brave enough to say no to him. I didn't set those boundaries with him and say, I'll work on all these things, but this I won't be able to do, because I just wanted to please. I was just so, I lived with the fear that if I say no, if I stand up for myself, that I will lose the job. But the thing is, I lost the job anyways. So it's realizing if you don't set those boundaries, you're not going to perform according to what your boss wants you to perform. And then things are not going to go the way that you want them to go.
Yeah, especially as young women. Many of us, my daughter may be the exception, many of us, we're not confident enough. I grew up in the South. Women are supposed to be quiet and not speak up. And especially when you enter the workforce that way, with that, you're already trained to not speak up. You're trained to keep quiet. And just do what you're told to do. That doesn't make for a great professional career, but we have to figure these things out. We have to figure out what we are good at and start running with those and accept it. I think even if, for me, I knew what I was good at, but I certainly wasn't going to speak up and go, okay, I want to do business development. Who am I to do that? And there's a lot of imposter syndrome, too, that I think many of us deal with. I think with the age thing, life has to throw you some curveballs for you to actually go, okay, I am going to speak up. I think motherhood, too, I have to speak up for my children. Oh, I won't speak up for myself, but I will speak up for the kid. But I think a lot of those things, and if there was one thing I could tell young women, please speak up. It's okay. And maybe if you're going to get fired for it, you shouldn't be there anyways. Yeah. You do it politely in the right manner, but speak up, stand up for yourself, be courageous, embrace your talents and your passions too. Because if you can do that earlier, I feel like life, you have a different runway.
Yeah. Have you experienced that you were punished because you did speak up?
Definitely growing up, for sure. So I think it started at a very young age.
And does that continue in the workplace?
Yes, I can think of at least one time where, because I was doing more duties than was expected from administrative support. And there was one moment that one of my administrative support colleagues came up to me and said, I just want to get this straight with you. That's leadership and you're administrative support. And so immediately my voice or whatever it was I was doing was squashed because I was just rocking the boat.
Oh, because you spoke up and that was considered leadership?
I can't remember what the tasks were. I was working with leadership on probably a deal. I can't remember what it was.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe think about improvement. And so it's really hard for me to walk into anywhere and not go, why aren't we doing it this way? How do we make this better? Something like that.
Oh,
and it just was, and I was newish, and this person had been there 10 something years. That's not the way we do things here. And so I rocked the boat early on and was
punished for it.
I was reined back in.
Yeah. She was putting you in your place, saying, hey, this is not what you do. Not great leadership from her part, for sure.
No, but she wasn't leadership. And usually you can tell leadership from non-leadership pretty quickly. I'm a student of leadership. Yeah. A leader would promote improvement, would promote someone wanting to go beyond their position in the right manner, especially if it was something that would be useful to the company.
Yeah, a leader tries to get the best out of the people around and encourage it, right? Yeah. And not squash it down. And that's why we have many people who are bosses but are not necessarily leaders.
Absolutely.
Because they're stuck in their own insecurity, thinking that if this person starts doing better, they're going to take my job. There's a lot of that competitive spirit that I experience at the workplace that is not really leadership. And one of the things that I write about in my book is the hope that if we can get more female leaders and encourage them to lead in a way that comes more naturally to us and not emulate what we've seen and what men have done for centuries, that we can create a better work culture. Because the other traits that women have, being better communicators, being able to pick up on signals in the room, being empathetic, compassionate, not saying men are not all those things. I think they are too. But having diversity in the workplace where you have women, people who are bringing more of these traits, it's going to become so much more valuable as we're entering into an era of AI, where everything is going to be automated, right? So what really is going to matter are all the things that AI is not able to do.
I think too, we're in a much improved age, but even from a leadership perspective, we embrace vulnerability. We embrace authenticity. We don't lead by fear or by power. It's not perfect, but these are things that men and women can do, and some of it can be trained too, I believe. And in celebrating emotional IQ, these are new things, but they're so important.
Yeah, no. And then today you're leading your own company. So tell us about that. What made you decide that you were going to start on your own and not have to work on something where you're depending on someone else for your paycheck? Now it's all on you.
Yeah. Yes, now it's all on me.
Yeah.
So that's the big story. It's sometimes an elevator pitch when it's appropriate. I found this job, and basically I was hired as a jazzed up executive assistant, but was told I could make it what I wanted it to be. In a completely different industry, I had been in oil field services, and this was in the downstream, petrochemical refining, chemicals. I figured out pretty quickly I'm in over my head. I don't understand the language, really didn't understand what the company did. On the 6th day of this new job, my son commits suicide. We all deal with tragedy our own way. I chose to throw myself into the position. Within months, I was promoted to VP of Business Development. I sold my first project with the company. Really learned quickly the language, what we were doing as a company. Started a leadership team. The gentleman at the time was ready to divest, and so we were working on divestment. Within more months, maybe a year, I was promoted to SVP Business Development. All of the things that I was doing all my life in jobs, business development, that memory, that curiosity, I was able to actually put into something that I was passionate about with this company. And at the age I was, it's weird to me that I didn't know what I do and do well, but I didn't until this moment.
What do you think changed when your son died?
I think I've thought a lot about that. I get a lot of questions about that. There's a silly saying, when life throws you lemons, you make lemonade. It was a catalyst. I think it's part of what we were talking about. It goes by so fast. You don't see something like that happening. You don't see a car wreck happening.
No.
A heart attack.
No.
I just took that pain, and I still don't think I've grieved completely. I don't know if you actually grieve completely.
How long ago was this?
It was 7 years ago. Yeah. But I took the pain and I ran with it.
Did you got also support from where you were? Someone was there who saw you and was willing to give you what you needed? Is that true?
I think so. I took maybe a day off from work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if I was really supported necessarily. I will say that my new team, they were supportive. As a family, we kept it very quiet.
So did you tell your employer?
Yes. Yes, I told my boss and my closest coworkers. There weren't very many people in the office. And then I just took off. It's almost as if, and I know it now, but in that moment of grief, things are really strange when something like that happens. Whether it's a kid or a spouse or a parent, death is death. There were so many things about it that I now understand better. But you feel, but you don't feel. You go into a survival mode, or I did.
Yeah. That's what I've heard. It's pretty normal because you're not really grieving at that moment. You're just like, how do I deal with this right now?
It's a day-to-day thing.
Yeah.
The grief can be incapacitating.
Yeah.
A punch in the gut. It's finicky. You'll be fine in one moment, and the next moment you're just not fine at all.
Yeah. And
there's all these things that happen during it. And I think, again, I don't have any judgment for people and I've met many mothers since I'm part of this SAD club, who really can't go on with life. And I completely understand that feeling. In fact, before I lost a child, I would have said, just tranquilize me. I won't survive that. There was a book on grief, and I don't remember the name of it, a woman who had lost her daughter in a car wreck. And she says the same thing. Before this happened, I would have told you, no way can I go on. You do find something in you to survive. And maybe it's because you have another child. Maybe it's just survival that comes out in you. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. In the centuries of mankind, we have lost people. Something has helped us, something to continue to keep going on.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the best explanation. But then now it's become even more so something that I'll be darned if I don't memorialize him. If I don't build a company and a brand where I can shine a light on mental health and suicide and honor his life. Because he did live.
Yeah. So you also, with time, discover like how to do that, how to honor his life, and how to shine light on what he had taught you. I've not met many people who take a day off after something so tragic happens and then go back to work. So I'm just trying to understand that. I guess that processing of that grief perhaps happened gradually over time later, because it wasn't like you went to work and you forgot about what happened.
No. I think for me, I bring up this just because I think it's really true for many of us, and I think it's a good tool. When Theodore Roosevelt was a child, he was very frail, very sickly, and his father told him to take action, get busy, whatever that may be. So for me, when this happened, the best thing that I could do was work.
Yeah.
I think I tell people, look, if I suffer from depression. If you suffer from depression, go do the laundry.
Yeah.
Wash the dishes, because it's fine if you make the decision to stay in bed all day. I've done it. But for me, I think my best self is when I'm busy. And I think I knew that somehow during that time. And I wanted to keep the job. Now, of course, I would have been given plenty of grace to have taken the time off I needed.
Yeah. But people, I guess, also understood that maybe you needed to work on something to get busy. And I think that's some advice that therapists actually give to people is like, just do something.
Yeah, anything.
To feel better, right? Like, one, go out and exercise and go for a walk. And second, just start working on your to-do list. And when I'm having a bad day, I've gotten some bad news or whatever, I just start doing that. And you automatically, you get this feeling of accomplishment.
In a little thing, it could
In a
be
little thing. It could be little.
And the one thing, since I'm so familiar with grief now, the one thing I've also learned is I'll have a moment, it's even now, 7 years later, it doesn't go away. I'll have a moment, but I know in about 30 seconds, a minute, that's going to pass. It's like meditation. You acknowledge and you let it go. The same with grief. I know that, okay, if I focus on making my to-do list, if I focus on sending that email, it will pass.
Yeah. But also, it's not that you're avoiding.
No.
I don't know if there's like a Netflix a movie or a series in which it's that actor from Titanic, that woman, what's her name? And it's a movie about her, and her son commits suicide, right? And I think we see the time afterwards of her, and that she's completely not processed it. And it shows up in a lot of different ways, in aggression and the way she deals with like other family members. And then they show like how she finally like talks about it and comes to terms with it. So there's, I think for some people, they might not process it immediately and put up a front that they're really strong. And I'm not saying that's what you were doing. I think you were just throwing yourself into work to just have another focus. And then it seems like you truly found purpose in what you were doing too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big believer in what we were doing at that company and then what we're doing with my company. And I think that's part of it too. And another sort of odd thing is that two of my colleagues now had both experienced, one had lost a child, an adult child, and one had just recently lost his wife. And there's that bonding that goes there. It's a sad club again, but there's a bonding there too that happens. Some people, I can tell them, no, my son committed suicide, because they'll ask me about my children. I'll say, I have two. What are they doing? My son committed, because I'm not going to say I don't have a child, if that makes sense. He lived, and I have two children. It's just unfortunate in a conversation with someone that I don't know that I have to tell you he committed suicide. And I know that's shocking, and people don't know how to deal with that.
Yes.
Which I completely get and actually wish sometimes I didn't know how to deal with death because I wasn't so familiar with it. But it's what it is. There are conversations where I've had where it goes right over their head because their brains can't process that in that moment, if that makes sense. Or they're uncomfortable, they don't know what to say, or whatever it is.
What is it that you would like people to say?
I'm so sorry is nice. Just an acknowledgement. I don't think it has to be, I can't think of anything in particular. A lot of times when someone tells me that, I just give them a hug if they're huggable. Because there aren't words really. Yes, there aren't words. But an acknowledgement is good.
Yeah, instead of just completely ignoring something that you've said. Yeah.
Because it's really important for people, whoever it is you've lost, to actually be able to voice that, to talk about memories, to acknowledge their lives.
Yeah. But it's also, your son didn't just die. It was suicide, and suicide has a lot of other stigma associated with it. Is it something that you had to process, or were you from the beginning very comfortable talking about it? It seems like you are today.
I think I was comfortable from the beginning. I think it took me a minute to not just completely lose it when I talked about it. It took me definitely years, and certainly not while I was at the other company, to use it as an elevator pitch, because I get a lot. And it's an elevator pitch, not because I want people's sympathy. It is because I get a lot. I'm usually often the only female in the room. I'm not an engineer. I've never legitimately worn a hard hat. My team are a bunch of some with 40 years of experience, engineers and operators with the chevrons of the world. And so I'll literally be asked in a room full of my team and executives with a client company, Jenny, I completely get why your guys are doing this, but you? And that's a legitimate question. And so that's when I started saying, since you asked, this is how this all happened. Because if you look at my resume, it doesn't make any sense that I'm a founder of a company in the petrochemical refining midstream industry. I didn't work in it. And so it became that because people would ask me, how did I get here? And really and truly, that's how I got here. My son died, and that grief catapulted me into learning this industry. And then when it was time for me to leave that company, really and truly, my only option was, again, you look at my resume, I'm not going to be SVP of business development at another company like this. It was just this journey to get me there, because it really doesn't make sense. I did learn what I do well, but that doesn't give me a certificate to say, okay, you can do this at some other company. I didn't see me being able to do that. I would have gone and tried to be an executive assistant somewhere else. So really my only option is to replicate what we were doing on my own.
Because you did it at the other company.
I did do it at the other company.
So you could create it again at this company. To often go through something like this, losing a child, especially through suicide, your coping mechanism was to find where you could use all that energy of grief and all these other feelings that you have onto creating and building something new. Did you also find community and people that helped you ease that pain?
My tribe, my friends. Yes. But I really think it was work. It was my team.
Okay.
My team at that company, and then definitely my team now.
Were you able to talk about these things with your team, like process what you were going through with your team?
A couple of them.
Because sometimes we compartmentalize work and home when you're the same person, whether you're at work or you're at home. So I think it's important to see that person as a whole. It's okay sometimes to bring those things that are on your mind to work, and being able to confide in people, especially if that is your life. Right? You're spending majority of your time there.
I do believe there are times at work when it's work. But I also think, at least for me now especially, my company is my life. It's such a big part of my life. My team feels like a family to me. One of my favorite memories was one of our first clients, first jobs. I had borrowed one of my team members' Nomex because I didn't have coveralls. And it was during a break at a client's office. And he and I were sitting up on the ledge, and we were talking about our dead sons, tearing up a little bit. And it's one of my favorite memories because it was that moment of just, I'm able to do this because often you're shut down. And at work, especially my guys and girls, they get really uncomfortable with kudos and talking about sensitive things. So we don't a lot of times. We'll talk about family and stuff, and if it's something very important, we're going to know. But that's just it was such a great moment because I was able to actually, I'm the boss, yes, but we were able to talk about our two kids that we missed.
Yeah, that's so powerful. But that is really it. Creating a work culture where you can do that, because then you can talk about it, you can let your emotions out, and then move back to work.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it might weigh on you. It might you might not be able to process what you need to in that moment if it's a work environment where there's no space for that.
Yeah, no, and I do hope with my team we do have that. I believe we do. We have the culture where, look, if we need to talk about something like that, or if someone's kid's sick or we can. Yeah.
You spoke about like our survival mechanism, and historically I think people lost kids a lot more often.
Yes.
And historically we were also a lot more community based.
Yes.
And we're not so anymore. So I was just curious if you felt that. Did you feel like you had that communal support from people?
Not immediately. When my son passed, we didn't even tell our church. There is so much stigma about suicide, but as I grew my team, and especially my team now, it's just different. I have a community. They check on me. I check on them.
And how did you then deal with the stigma of suicide?
I haven't, thankfully, personally witnessed too much of it. Recently I did.
Okay.
But it was really the first time, I'm sure behind my back, or people are very judgmental about suicide. And I think it's the reason why a lot of people, there's a lot of things that go on with it. It's a lot of things that go on with mental health. We don't admit we're depressed because we don't want to appear weak. We don't admit a suicide because they might judge me as a parent.
Yes.
That's real, and it happens.
Yeah.
And it's a problem. It's a problem with suicide for sure.
Yeah. What do we get wrong about suicide that leads to all these like judgments and thoughts that we have?
I don't know what it is we get wrong, except for we don't talk about it enough. I think historically we've not talked about it enough. It's much better now, but it's still got a huge, long way to go, especially when you consider suicide rates are sky high. Mental health issues should be talked about far more than they are. It's not a weakness. I do a lot of work on that front now, and it's interesting. If you know you have a heart condition, you're going to go to the heart doctor and take care of it. But we don't do that for mental health, and there's lots of reasons for that too. There's people can't afford it, insurance doesn't cover it. A large part of the population, it's a huge, in different cultures, it's especially a stigma. They don't talk about it. They can't get transportation to help. They don't know where to get help. There are so many barriers to getting the help for mental health.
Yeah.
And there shouldn't be.
Yeah. And it's because we don't really think about mental health as an illness in the same way as all the other illnesses that are out there, right? That have mental health also has symptoms, but I think it's still relatively new in that we're taking it seriously and that we're talking about it. I think even 10 years ago, it wasn't that prevalent. I think we started talking more about it, like in our workplaces, for example. I remember during COVID, it became a bigger topic, and we would get in people who would come and give some training around this, because you're right. It is, the brain is such an important part of who we are and how we operate and what we do. And if we don't keep that in check, like how we're mentally feeling and how we're doing. I know you're pretty active in talking about suicide and mental health. What are the key things that you want people to know?
Number one, it's okay to talk about it. It is okay to talk about it. And that's what I was going to say. I met my first, at least what I've heard of my first bad experience with someone's feelings about me talking about my son. A colleague basically said, after me filming something about my son, "No one cares about your dead son."
Wow.
That's to me, that's pretty hard. Oh, okay. That's why we don't talk about it, because we don't want reactions like that.
Yeah.
So talk about it. I'm not saying you...
And I think that reaction from someone like that is more of a state of mind they're in. It has nothing to do with what you spoke about, but like how they feel like maybe the attention should be on them.
Exactly. And I'm sure it was something like that. By the way, not a colleague with my company. I'll just put it out there.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Make it a safe place for others to talk about it. It's okay. There is a fine line. You don't want to divulge everything, I think, especially in the workplace or anywhere else. But I have depression, and I take medicine, and I do the things that I know I need to do for me, routines and such, so that I don't have a day where I want to stay in bed. I don't feel like I'm weak because of that. In fact, you're probably stronger if you're actually admitting it and taking care of it the proper way. So just people talking about it and making it safe to talk about it. Don't make comments that "I don't care about your dead son." Just
be more sensitive.
Make it a safe conversation for anyone. If we're shining a light on it, the next time someone doesn't hear from a friend, they decide to reach out. Or elevator pitch. A few times that I've actually been in a boardroom and said, "Okay, this is why I'm here. My son committed suicide, and I threw myself in my job and then started my own company."
Yeah.
I literally, after that meeting, am pulled aside by executives who say, "Hey, I'm so glad you said something. I lost my brother to suicide." It's happened a few times. A president of another company, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know I lost a sister to suicide." So we're talking about it, and it's okay for you to admit it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes more of something we can talk about, just as we would talk about, "Hey, so-and-so has cancer. They're getting treatment at MD Anderson." Great.
Because it is now who you are, right? It's part of your identity too. And then people can connect with you on that, because it's all about human connection. What you do, business development, is like finding people to work with and connecting with other businesses. And that's, you give people an opening because you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you are authentic about who you are.
It is part of my identity. I can't. It's not always appropriate to say it, but if you're going to know me, you're going to know that I lost my son.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about mental health and suicide.
Yeah, and it seems like you're someone who's really built, like you said, because you struggle with or you suffer from depression, that you've built these routines, you've learned how to grapple with when your feelings get out of control, that you've dealt with this suicide in a similar way, that you've figured out a way to like how to manage this very overwhelming feeling. Because sometimes what people would do, like I would think if something tragic was to happen to me, that I would go into a few days of like just crazy expression of feelings, and then over time, like I know I'm resilient, like I would build it back up and I would find purpose and I would come out of it. I was wondering, like, how did you build that so that you were very resilient from the get-go to deal with such tragedy?
Again, I think it was survival, and then knowing triggers. So X may happen, and that's going to probably send me into a thing. I think it's about tools. So what do I need? What are the things that I need to do to make sure I'm operating at my best? I think you don't have to have experience of suicide. You don't have to have depression. But I think just for any of us, what are the things that we each need to do? And it varies from person to person, to be our best self every day. So for me, it's at least 8 hours of sleep. Water, trying to eat as well as I can, exercise,
basic like health,
just the basic stuff, right? But for me, I have a gratitude devotional thing I do in the morning. It's really important to me. My workout is really important to me, and I can tell if I get really busy and those things go to the wayside, it affects me. But they're tools that I put in place, and I do the best I can to be very disciplined about them. Yeah. Not to the point where they become chores, but just I know that I'm better when I get these things checked off the list every day.
Yeah. And we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but how did you, because you also have a daughter, how did you manage, because we talked about not being guilt-free as a mom, and how like the pressure of being there for her and helping your daughter process the pain.
So I'll never forget the day it happened. I was actually at the office. My sister calls me to tell me, and it's still one of those moments you're like, I'm not sure I heard that right. He did what? I managed to drive myself home that day, and the second worst thing, instead of hearing that news, was having to tell her. And she had been at softball practice or something, so she got home, and I told her, completely broke down. She looks at me, it registered, and she goes to her room, no tears. And she's organizing and rummaging through things when I went to go check on her. And I knew what she was doing. She was looking for drawings that he had left for her. She didn't tell me, but I know that's just what she was doing. She was looking for anything of his. For the longest time after I wasn't around her, she would shut me down if I started to cry, because it makes them really uncomfortable when moms cry. And it wasn't until that November, he died in March, late March. It wasn't until that November that we had a memorial service for him. He had been an actor at the Texas Renaissance Festival. He was part of the performance company.
Oh, wow.
So we went out to his group and had a thing for him, and she broke down then. But it took her quite a bit of time. And I don't think that's not something you force on them. Yeah. We all have to deal with it in our own way. Unless they're acting out, unless there's something going on that needs to be addressed, I think you just let it happen on its own time. And that's what happened with her. Yeah. Now it's funny. She has a lot of his things. His favorite jacket. He was a Marine. So she has a bunch of his camo that she uses. Did one Christmas when I finally had the courage to go through his sea bag and wash all of his camo. I didn't tell her, but I wrapped it for her. I thought she could use it. And she opens the first thing. Is this his? Didn't have to say Daniel's. His. Yes, honey. And she just, it was so meaningful for her to have it. But it's taken years. It's taken 7 years for her to get to that point. For her college graduation a few weeks ago, I found a glass artist who actually takes ashes and she blows glass hearts with the ashes inside them. And that may have been one of her most meaningful graduation gifts.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Gave her the space to mourn in her own way and not impose anything on her. And how has that impacted your guys' relationship since now?
I think we're very close.
Yeah.
And we can talk about him now without tears. And he was a really funny guy, so there's lots of funny things. And every once in a while, it's really strange. I'll see him in her. So something she does, or the way she dances, or...
No, I'm just in awe of your strength and also the strength of your daughter to process this. And everyone processes grief in their own way. But it's also quite admirable to see you can get past also such tragedy. You can learn from it, you can grow from it, you learn about yourself, and you can still show up with grace and being grateful for, it seems that's what I sense, is that just grateful for the time that you had with him. And I think the question I was going to ask was like, did you have any indication that this was going to happen?
No, I think all of us feel like it was just a lightning strike. He had some bad news. He was a Marine, so he had gone to boot camp. He did that. He had a little bit of college under his belt. He just always struggled with maybe what he was going to do. He was very talented. He was a drummer. He was a comedian for sure. And I think he'd had some bad news, and he went on a binge drinking. And I think it was just, life just sucked in that moment. And he decided it wasn't worth living. So no indication, no note.
So it wasn't that he had done that before or tried to do that before?
He could be reckless, and he could make sometimes decisions you think, but we all do sometimes. No indication that it would have been that.
Yeah. And it seems like you operate now, since that happened, pretty guilt-free. So it's not like you weigh any of whatever his actions and what happened on you.
No, I wish I'd stood up for him more. I wish I'd been more present for him. But I was doing what I could do in that moment. I never had anger against him, and just about everybody else did, and I totally get that. But because I suffer from depression, and I know, and I understand it, I don't agree with his decision, but I know where it came from.
Yeah.
Especially in those moments.
Yeah, it can...
You can think about a lot of things. And so I don't agree with it, but I understand where it came from.
Yeah.
I do wish that he had told me.
Yeah.
That
he had reached out.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's always going to be that feeling of I could have done something, but also giving yourself grace, which is what I see in you, is that despite all that happening, you give yourself grace. And I think that's the best way for us to live, because things are going to happen that are out of our control. As moms, as parents, we think we can control everything our kids are going to do. But as they grow older, we're going to lose more and more of that control.
Yeah, and they are their own humans. They're their own humans at a very young age. We can't control the decisions that they make, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being honest and open and transparent with us about that. And like I said, I think like you said, not a lot of people talk about this, but this is such an important topic, and which is why I wanted to bring you on, so that we can touch light on this and learn from you that these brave conversations are important as we as community try to deal with suicides and mental health, and knowing someone who's been through this. So thank you for doing that, and thank you also for doing all the work that you do around this and educating people on that. Do you want to share with us a little bit about some of the things that you do in terms of mental health Yeah.
Yes. So I serve on the board of the Harris Center Foundation, which supports the Harris Center, who it's an amazing organization. I had never heard of it before I met them. They certainly could have helped Daniel. So they help not just Houston and greater Houston, but a large part of the state on several things. IDD, they help with jail diversion. That's a big thing. You've got people like my son, for instance. He was never arrested, but if he had been arrested having some sort of mental something, instead of throwing them in jail, which isn't really going to help the problem, but that's what historically has happened, there's a jail diversion. So they're assessed by the Houston Police Department and then put in a mental health, it's not, sometimes it's a hospital, but a diversion center where they can get the treatment that they need, rather than, because that's not going to happen in jail. They'll just continue to go through that cycle.
Yeah.
So it keeps the jails clearer, but it also gets them the help that they need.
Yeah.
They do a lot of in and outpatient help as well for people, especially who can't afford mental health care. So just a vast amount of services that they do. They filled a large majority of the 988 calls too. They have a call center that's helped even with the storm. They also do community response. So when Uvalde happens or other things, they'll send out units to help the people deal with these things that do happen.
Yeah.
So that's been great. It's so much fun to see these employees that deal with some pretty tough stuff every day for their job. The passion that these people have, it's just amazing. And they make a difference in the community. And they've also served as models across the nation as far as jail diversion and other things. I think the police department from Atlanta is interested in learning what Houston is doing as far as keeping these people that need help out of jail so that they can actually get the help that they need. So fantastic work, fantastic organization. But I also do work with the unhoused community. So there's something called the Art Tent that's set up during the hot months. And it's we set up really nice art supplies, paper, really nice paper, charcoal even, crayons, markers, collage materials. And we invite the unhoused community to come and do art. There's no counseling, there's no judgment, no pressure. And you would be amazed to see the joy on these people's faces. My son was homeless for a bit before he committed suicide. And I hope that there was someone as kind to him and he had some joy, as I've seen at the art tent. We had one gentleman show up who was suicidal. In the moment, we were able to have him sit down and just color for a bit. And at least that day we saved a life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's great for people to know about that these organizations exist, that this work is being done, so that they know who they can go to and if this is an important cause for them, like what they can support too. So thank you for sharing. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about like your company and where you are today now and how you've built it over the past 5 years, I guess now. How you started it, what was some of the most challenging parts of actually doing this on your own, and then how were you able to then get these advisors on board to build a company that's thriving? Yeah.
I don't know how I got these guys to follow me. But so I left my former company in April of 19 and started up Gem Advisors in May of 19. Thankfully, we've been invoicing almost consistently since July of 19. I bootstrapped it. My daughter has a very expensive horse habit, and she was a junior, I think, in high school at the time. So scary. She doesn't remember. She thinks I'm an overnight success, or she did think that. But she doesn't remember. We were driving around on spare tires, both of us, eating cans of tuna. There were some really scary days in the beginning. Because you don't just start up a company and make money. No. That doesn't happen. No. And I had no investors, so it was a thing. My team, part of it, some of them came over from the former employer. Some of them, and then they started talking to their friends or people they'd worked with in the industry. We're Chevron heavy. I love my Chevron guys, but that's only helped us. I still pinch myself because I get asked a lot, how did you get these guys to follow you? Because if you know anything about operators and refiners, they don't jump in the trenches with just anybody. And I'm not the operator or refiner. And that's really for them saying something. I think it's the story about my son. A couple of them had significant losses in their lives as well. I think it's my authenticity, and they knew I was passionate about building this, and it's our core values too. That's a big thing. So we probably almost to a fault follow them. You learn a lot from bad behavior, and you learn a lot in your life about what not to do. And so probably to a fault, we definitely don't try and be on that spectrum at all. But I think that's also only worked for us because we have these very transparent, solid relationships with our clients. And that was another thing too. In client services, all you have is your reputation. So from the very beginning, we knew that we had to build slowly and carefully to make sure that we didn't oversell and underdeliver. And we've been successful at that as well. And they're just, my team does all the work.
Yeah.
So they're just the type of people that will come into a client asset, and I've seen it go a lot of ways. They're more coaches and mentors. I'm going to say this, sometimes grandfathers to the operators of the client companies. So they get this respect, but in a way that's not, it doesn't cause people's defenses to rise. Just, they get the respect and they become these coaches that are welcome. And there are a lot of third-party companies that do what we do. And I think for us to have won that respect and built those relationships with our clients is huge. And it's the reason for our success.
Yeah, and they keep on coming back, right? That's
right.
And these are big operators. It's not like small companies.
No.
Yeah, so it's not an easy task.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I have some quick rapid fire questions before we end. What advice would you give someone that's stuck and lost in their career?
Choose what you're passionate about, even if that means making a big scary step.
What is something that most people often get wrong about you?
Oh, everyone thinks I'm an extrovert, and I'm not.
Really?
No one believes this. I've literally had a couple of my team members fall out of their chairs laughing when I say, no, I'm an introvert. Business development, while it's my passion and I believe that I'm pretty good at it, it's also, if I go on a road trip for 2 days, I'm in pajamas for the next 4.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Some introverts can have very good communication skills and be really relationship oriented and be very good at building those relationships. That doesn't mean that they're extroverts, right? That doesn't mean that like they get energy from being around people all the time. So it's also sometimes I think people don't understand the difference. Sometimes people think, oh, just because this person is shy, they're introverted. A shy person can be very extroverted. So it's not necessarily an indication. What is a hard leadership lesson that the universe keeps throwing at you that you have to relearn over and over?
That's a really good one. Maybe just believing in myself. I experience imposter syndrome frequently, and I think it really shouldn't be called a syndrome. It should be more like an event. Yeah. Because you'll have it and then you'll snap out of it. Believing in myself.
It's so important. But we all feel like that sometimes, right? But it's like being able to overcome that feeling. If you could change one thing in the world, what would that be?
Also a really good one. I'm going to use the big word of injustice. That's what I would change. Just in general, whatever that means to you. Because even as a female in industry, I have, as a divorced woman, I have. If there could just be more justice in the world. Yeah. Maybe that big word grace again. Yeah. If there could just be more of that. Compassion.
Yeah. What is something you're most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the company and what the team and I have built. We are fiercely proud about what we have built together. I'm proud of my daughter just from the loss that she's experienced, but also dealing with a mom who I've built it. It's not been easy. That's the misconception, and her strength to have continued to be successful alongside that.
And you mentioned a book on grief. Do you have any book that's had a transformational impact on you that you could recommend?
Transformational impact. I'm a big reader. This is going to be popular, but so Sarah Moss, SJM, her books are fantastic, especially the Assassin series. There's so much female power there and encouragement. There are quotes that I have snapshots of that I've underlined. I'm big about having quotes handy as tools when things aren't going so great, to remember that, yeah.
For inspiration.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so important. No, thank you for that recommendation. I'll have to get a copy of some of her books because I've not read. Thank you so much, Jenny, for coming on here, for being open, for sharing. You are so brave. So much we can learn from you. And I try to bring on guests here who represents the diversity of leadership, and I think you definitely do represent that. And I want to particularly show that to women, that there's different ways of showing up as leaders and being authentic in who you are, and showing up, without shame, because often we carry that feeling that can be very debilitating. But if we can be more honest and have these conversations, that this is something that I don't maybe feel very good about myself about, but I'm still going to talk about it, we can grow from it together and start being more accepting of people. So you are also someone who shows us that we don't have to have perfect lives to be happy and fulfilled and build a successful business alongside. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for coming on here and for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Something from Nada podcast. Hey, you made it this far. Give us a like and follow. If you'd like to learn more about how you can be a guest, a sponsor, or want to learn about my book, Determined to Lead, head to my website, www.nadahmed.com. That's www.nadahmed.com. Thank you.